Welcome back, everyone, to the Live Midwest podcast, the only podcast where none of the other regions were taken, but we still chose the Midwest anyways. I'm your host, Kevin, alongside Wes.
Hello.
I can't believe it, but next week we're already going to be at double digits, which isn't really much of a milestone to celebrate if you think about it, because that's 10 episodes. We've been doing this for 10 weeks. I mean, it is a milestone, but it isn't.
It's a milestone enough. We can celebrate.
I think the other reason why is because we know that there are so many podcasts out there that I've heard the phrase coined of pandemic podcast or quarantine podcast, where people are doing a podcast only because they're bored.
Yeah, I don't think that's us, is it?
No, that's definitely not us.
No,
not at all. Because we have so many different topics that we want to cover that we feel passionately about. Actually, this one specifically is one that hits really close to home for me, and I'm really looking forward to talking about today. What are normal thoughts? What does that even mean when we say normal thoughts? Typically, we talk about normal being like this perception of like our attributions and the way that we think things should be based on our upbringing and our experiences. It's just there's a lot to unpack today, and I'm really excited to talk about it. Wes, how about you?
Yeah, this is a super interesting topic. Do you want the TLDR version of this entire podcast right now, or do we save that?
Oh, we save that. We absolutely save that. Yeah.
Because there's totally like a few word TLDR of this whole thing. Which sums it up really great. But you guys will have to wait till the end because the boss said so.
Someone's going to be like, F this, and just like stop the podcast. Speaking of listeners who stop the podcast, we want to give a quick shout out to some listeners that we've noticed around the world. The UK, Thailand, Brazil, India. Those are some pretty far away places from where we're at.
What is even the Midwest to them?
I don't know. and they're definitely far away from the Midwest, but that doesn't mean that these experiences and these things that we talk about aren't relevant around the world. So we just wanted to say, hey, we see you, we hear you, and well, more like you hear us. But it's really, really cool to start to see some listenership come in from around the globe, and it's really inspiring. I think obviously it's not like we're not going to do this for a long time, but man, it really makes you want to keep going even more than you already are.
Can we get like some fanfare edited in for this part? Like, woo!
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'll do the little grunts from Halo 3.
Perfect.
Oh man, no, it's just really daunting to see that kind of stuff happening. So I just wanted to give it a quick shout out. And obviously this is also a part of our Patreon to get specific shout outs too. So we'll talk about that more after the break. Wes, let's dive right into this whole what are normal thoughts. I kind of want to give an example of what I mean when I say this. So let me give an example of what we're talking about when we say, like, is this a normal thought or things like that. Let's say that you're driving on a 2-lane highway or a 2-way highway, right? And you're going in one direction and there's the semi truck coming in the other direction. And there's this thought in your brain that goes off and you're kind of like, what if I just turn that steering wheel just a little bit? Like, obviously, you know that you're going to die, but you have to sit there and think about it. And it's like, well, am I going to, like, is it going to be a matter of, like, death? Is it going to be quick? How much is it going to hurt? Will people miss me? It's almost like this. And Wes was telling me about there's a terminology for this called call to the void. And we'll come back and we'll talk about that and dive into that a little bit. But it really centers around, like, are these normal thoughts? Does everyone think these things? Is it healthy to think these things? Is it normal? Does it mean there's something wrong with me? Am I screwed up? The short answer to that is no, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The short answer is no, you're not screwed up. But we want to talk about why and what goes into that and things like that. So when the idea came up and we were kind of like brainstorming different ideas, it was really interesting. Because I brought it up and I said, I told Wes, I said, I think about this stuff all the time. Like, I'm not going to do it. I know I'm not going to do it, but it's like, man, like, why do I think those things? Why do those thoughts come to my mind? And so we're definitely going to dive into that a little bit today. So this is going to end up being a mini series, kind of like when we talked about decentralization in the first part, and then the psychological effects of decentralization. We're going to talk about what are normal thoughts today. And then next week, we're going to talk about what are abnormal thoughts. What are those thoughts that are unhealthy, that mean that not necessarily that you need help, because we're not here to dictate that or make that sort of analysis, but kind of comparing it to, yeah, everybody thinks that. And then next week, kind of talking about some examples of. So Wes, I'm going to kick it over to you as we start talking about normal thoughts here. I know everyone's probably thought of that example, but is there more to it than that?
Call to the void is quite literally a thought that most likely is going to result in death or some adverse consequence that is, you can't really come back from that. So if you think, oh, I'm going to blow up this building with all these people in it, like, you might not die in that scenario, but you're not coming out of that okay. You're going to end up either, killed yourself or put away forever. Ideally, one of those things happen. Hopefully you don't get away after doing that, because that'd be bad. But a call to the void is just because you think things doesn't mean you're going to do them. Like in the video game example, just because you play Call of Duty and you love shooting people doesn't mean in real life you're going to do that. It's a thought experiment. It's an exercise in forward thinking about the consequences that would become, and like the situation scenarios that surround it that would become from doing something reckless, something you wouldn't normally do. And I think that's a normal thought. I haven't met someone who doesn't have those types of thoughts.
In that case, what are normal thoughts?
Well, a normal thought is anything that you think, really. So thought, I guess we can describe this a little better than that. Thoughts are products of our perception. We discussed perception already. You see something and you kind of label what that is. You figure out what it is. You have a set way to deal with that, a set like architecture in your mind of identifying the things, the events, the happenings you see. And your thoughts are all products of that perception. Without perception, you don't have anything to think about. We see the world in a way relative to our individual upbringings, our familial influences, unique experiences, to an extent our socioeconomic class, and localized as well as cultural or societal influences. You exist within an environment, and the environment fosters the way you will perceive the world, therefore the way you will think about the world. In other words, we perceive the world based on the information we have from our time interacting with the world. And I don't think there's anything abnormal about the way you think if the way you think comes from who you are. So what are normal thoughts? I don't think, here's the TLDR already, that too long didn't read, or in this case, too long didn't listen. There are no normal thoughts, I don't think, but all thoughts are normal in that same vein. So normal is how we see it, the individual, how we interpret it. And I guess for an example, I was the only one in my family who played video games or used computers for leisure, as opposed to using it for work or school. Like, I actually had fun from it. I explored it more. I spent a lot of time around them. So compared to my family members who didn't have that type of interaction with that part of the world, I thought abnormally when compared to them. But compared to my peers, other individuals like me who grew up using the internet, playing video games, I don't think I thought abnormal at all. So normal is, to the person, what normal is. So I guess just to reiterate, our thoughts are who we are, And when we couple those thoughts with our actions and influences, which will change, given time or circumstance, normalcy is then subjective to the individual, and it's forever changing. So normal today might not be normal tomorrow.
Which also means that what's normal today is also not what was perceived as normal 50 years ago, right?
Of course.
So, thinking today is not what it was 100 years ago. I even think about like the enlightened thinkers, the real grassroots of philosophers and just the way that they think might have been different given today. And that's partially because of influences and surroundings, like you're saying, right?
Right.
So I mean, and I think that's really interesting, because if you think about it, 50 years ago, if you were a male and you were sensitive or expressed how you felt or you showed your emotions, you were labeled as like, oh, like this, you must, why are you being so feminine? Get over it, suppress it, move on, like be a man up. And I think like even people today still say that phrase.
Yeah, in some communities that's still very normal.
And it's unfortunate because, I mean, regardless of your gender, it's just funny that we even have to have this conversation in 2021. But regardless of your gender, like you are going to have emotions. Like that's just kind of how you're wired. Like but again, like these days, for the most part, like you said, outside of some communities, these days, for the most part, we know better. We know that suppressing problems and emotions is abnormal, and we've learned there that adverse consequences, outweigh the benefits of not talking about problems. People bottle up, people snap, bad things happen. I'm not saying it's the reason why we've had every mass shooting ever, but I mean, it's fair to say that it's a point. Like, it's possible. But the people who would externalize their normal thoughts, so to speak, to condemn others for talking about their feelings, like that's considered toxic now. A toxic masculinity, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that what that is? Mm-hmm. So like having like this normalcy of like males who are supposed to suppress how they feel. It's just like, it's just a really, really good example to hang your hat on. So that's kind of like why we're going down this road with that. So having said that, there certainly is kind of this latency, this lull in reaching 100% assimilation on a given topic. Therefore, like even on this topic alone, as far as toxic masculinity, there are two or more. There's usually more than two normal ways to think about it, right? You were just giving some examples, saying like, pull up your pants, Nancy, we got some work to do. Like they're like,
right, thinking about like feelings, holding in feelings or whatever. Someone of an older generation, it might be very normal for them and their friends and community and everyone who thinks alike to say, no, get to work, quit complaining. Whereas the youth are more focused on, well, there's adverse consequences to doing that, and I think we should talk about this. So it's the same topic about sharing emotions, but there's to two different groups, and obviously there's uncountable numbers of groups around that think differently. So at the very least, I would assume on any topic there's at least two normal ways to think about something, whereas there's probably more. Normal is what normal is, right? It doesn't mean it's facts. It's something that has to happen. Normal does not equal factual. Just because it's normal to think a certain way doesn't mean you're thinking about it right. You're just thinking about it normally as you would given your circumstances. So like many norms in various cultures and society have no root or base in science. We care a lot in this country about freedom and the American dream and good old America.
This is Facebook. I can say whatever I want.
And that's a normal way to think for someone. Is it healthy? Maybe not. Is it correct or factual? Well, no, it's all subjective. But it is normal to many people to think that way. And it's also normal for people with a knowledge deficit to believe silly things like the world is flat. that makes complete sense within their circumstances. Ideally, we don't deal with that too much in the future. I hope with advancements in technology and education, that won't happen. But anytime there's a knowledge deficit, or I guess another word for it is ignorance, it's normal for people under those circumstances, in those conditions, to think things that we would consider silly or abnormal, I suppose.
And technology, has been the root of many of our conversations. Technology is part of is one of the players here in this recipe, as far as it's changing what our normal thoughts are as well. Do you use TikTok, Wes?
People share TikToks with me, so I have to admit I do watch them.
But do you sit there and you just swipe and swipe and swipe?
Not at all.
Okay, I don't either, but there are a lot of people who do. And it's a really great example of how our attention span is meant to be like a minute long. Like, that's how long the videos are. They are a minute long. It's 60 seconds. And like, that's the max that they can be. And so we're being pulled in all these different directions and having all these different thoughts. And it's, we see all these different things and these different ideas that people are putting out there and creating within their content, that's making us think and feel all these different things that people weren't even feeling 50 years ago. I mean, okay, let's talk about memes. You don't scroll TikTok. Let's talk about memes. Thinking about 100 different memes from your day browsing the internet is not something that was normal 20 years ago. 20 years ago. That was 2001. Like, memes were a thing, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It wasn't like a way of life. It wasn't like a major that you could go to a community college for. And now it is. I don't remember the name of the college. I will look it up and I will put it in the podcast description, but there is a college where you can actually get some sort of degree in memes.
I find it valid. Seems relevant.
It's in California. I do know that. I mean, everything's... Totally what isn't relevant in California? Jesus Christ.
I'm a memeologist. I study memology at the Meme University of Memes. I don't know.
I genuinely think that's what it's called. It's like meme. It's like memology or memology. It's probably memology.
Well, meme has its roots in social theory from the 70s, so it's not irrelevant, right?
We're gonna have to do an episode on that. I actually did not know that.
Yeah, we can do an episode. What is memes?
We're gonna do an episode on the history of memes.
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 Okay, how about a third example? Let's talk about movies. Movies today versus movies from even a decade ago, 2011, versus movies from 50 years ago in 1961. They keep packing in more and more and more content. We're not just talking about like not the side effects. I
watched this movie last night and got this terrible case of just rash all over my body. I'm
gonna cut the cord to your microphone, I swear.
You're the one that said side effects.
I know. What? Just like special effects. That's what I was thinking of. And you think about like how so many more of those are packed in, but that's not really like what draws and pulls your attention in all these different directions. It's just there's so many different things happening. There's so many different like subplots at play that you have to keep track of. And it's what also can lead people to say like, well, there's too much going on. It's a really good example actually too that I'm going to throw in here is Family Guy. Think about the number of people who say, I don't like Family Guy. And you ask them why, and they go, well, I just don't get it. And I think it's different between saying that you don't find it funny and saying that you don't get it. It's like people who say that baseball is boring. There's so much subplay going on there, and it's the same thing with Family Guy. The show is over 2/3 just references to something. And they're cutting in and out of scenes, and they're pulling you all over the place. And unless you are actually sitting there and following that along, of course you're dooming yourself to sit there and say, I don't get it.
But what about the one-liners? You don't even have to pay attention to that. Peter can just be like, God damn it, Loish, and that's a knee slapper.
For some. And for others, it's just not their sense of humor. And then they're just not properly articulating how they feel about a show. We're getting away from the topic here, but the point is that normal thinking is always evolving. And there's a reason, and so it makes it kind of silly to call it normal thinking, because you're not, like, it's just always changing. It's just always changing, whether it's because of movies or pop culture or social culture or the way that things are designed in our current lifestyle with TikTok. As silly as that sounds to say, it's a pillar of what we have going on here. So it basically means normal thinking here is not normal thinking there, right?
Right. So normal thinking here, I guess, here is wherever you are. The Midwest, Ohio, the United States.
Brazil.
Yeah.
India.
Thailand. I was so excited about that. Anyways, normal here is not normal there. And that's due to, and I think we've touched on it, it's due to the circumstances surrounding you and culture. So in Japan, being unique is seen as not normal. They really put a premium on conformity and causing the least amount of resistance for people around them. Sticking out in a crowd is avoided to maintain normalcy. Meanwhile, here in the US, many people pride themselves on how unique they are. It's reflected in our shows, our music, and our self-appraisal is based on how unique we are. That's just normal. And of course, language plays a part into what's normal. It's called linguistic relativism. Common words and norms in speech influence how we think. So my girlfriend's going to kick my butt because I'm probably saying this wrong. In some languages like Thai, they don't really conjugate their verbs by tense or relevance to time. So in Thai, it's normal, I guess, to say Kevin running, as opposed to Kevin will run, Kevin is running, Kevin ran, just Kevin running, and then you use context to fill it in. That's really abnormal here.
So regardless as to whether it's past tense, present tense, or future tense, you just essentially say Kevin running. It's translated as Kevin running.
I believe so. That's how she explained it to me, but if I misinterpreted it, she's going to kick my ass. I don't know. Even if that's not true, it's a really good example because there are languages that do not conjugate their verb tense.
Right. So even if it's not Thai, it exists.
Right. I think specifically in like native languages, like Native American and like the First Peoples languages, like the older the languages, I think they have less conjugation and more simplicity and context driven. So it's language also affects what is normal, at least to you and those around you. There has to be some type of like mental schematic that figures out the tense when you're using conjugation like that, opposed to just hearing the conjugation. Kevin is running. Okay, I know right now at this point in time he's running, regardless of what running means. Running on his feet, running late, running on a car, whatever. It's abnormal for English speakers to actually figure that out. Like, Kevin running, what does that mean?
It almost kind of creates this us versus them mentality, where if you speak a language and somebody else speaks a different language, and either you're trying to speak their language or they're trying to speak your language, it creates this us versus them. Even if you're not someone who's like, oh damn foreigners, blah blah blah. Like if you actually sit there and you're like, what this person is saying doesn't sound normal. It may sound normal to them based on the language that they spoke. It's a really, really primitive example. But if you think about it, it's like, let's zoom out on that a little bit, right? Let's zoom out on and just zoom all the way out to normal versus abnormal thoughts on this. And that's pitting people against how other people think and label whether themselves or others are normal or abnormal. Like if someone's saying Kevin running in English, that's how, like, to them that's normal. To you, that's abnormal. But let's take the language aspect out of it, and let's talk about how, you know, if somebody says something like oh, they're just feeling really down or feeling really sad. Well, now we're just saying like, oh, well, that's not a normal thing to feel. Like, what, you're just feeling like sad for no reason? Like, that's silly. This is subjective and serves like no function in learning the truth. Whether it's about Kevin running or someone feeling sad, it doesn't help us categorize those who are like us and unlike us. So stop doing the us versus them thing, I guess.
Is this empathy again? Well, that's all, folks. We brought it full circle.
Coming up, empathy. No, kidding. We are going to take a break here. Coming up on the other side of the break, when we come back, we're going to be talking about negotiating identity. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Life Midwest podcast. On the other side of the break, it's Kevin alongside Wes.
I'm Wes.
The only podcast where for some reason they're still calling it pop instead of soda.
There's no way we call it pop. You call it soda, I call it soda. We need to do a whole episode on that bullshit because it's soda.
We will. We absolutely will. A lot of wacky episodes are going to be coming up in April because I want to do more opinionated based episodes because it's still technically a social science because we're studying ourselves in the way that we think and the way that we feel. Anyways, if you're looking for ways to support us, we do have a Patreon that's fully live. Got a website you could check out. All of these links are in every single podcast description of every single episode because we're really uniform and semi-professional like that. We really are making an effort there. Reach out to us at all of our socials at the Life Midwest on your platform of choice, whether you're a bird or a camera or a square with a lowercase f on it. See what I did there? You can also email us at the Life Midwest. Wait, what? No, it's support@thelifemidwest.com. Yes. You can email us there. Tell us if you like something. Tell us if you hated something. You can also leave us a review. Good old bathroom stall Sharpie signature type review, where you give us a rating and tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure you're subscribing on your favorite podcast listening platforms and telling your friends about us.
Okay, Kevin. Your Sharpie on the bathroom actually reminded me of something.
Okay.
Remember that hookah bar called Suck It?
Yeah.
Remember the cock lobster on the bathroom wall that had like a Bible verse next to it?
Yes.
That became a meme that my friend shared with me who lives across the country. I'm like, I know that. I was there.
You'll have to show me that after we're done recording because that's great. That's great. Something I'll hear. See, we're not the only thing to come out of the Midwest, folks.
There's also memes.
So right before the break, we were going to talk about negotiating identity. And is that kind of just like when you're figuring out who you are? Is that like this, like the soul searching, like self-identity stuff?
Kinda, yeah. It happens all the time though. So I guess as an example, what is normal to you today is going to be different for what is normal for you at a different point in your life. And I guess this kind of goes back to our last topic as far as the historical context of it, but this is on a personal scale rather than on a large grand scheme of things. Let's say you label yourself as a responsible parent. Your husband, wife, partner gives you this identity. Your children give you this identity. Your friends give you this identity. They all affirm your beliefs that you're a responsible parent. For all intents and purposes, you are a responsible parent, and you will adhere to what you perceive to be normal for that role. What happens when you retire from being a parent? Are your thoughts, your actions now abnormal? No. You just have a different way of seeing yourself and operating now. You will adhere to the norms of your newfound role. Maybe you're a grandma or grandpa, retired parent, free agent, whatever. As a kid, your mom might tell you you're a good kid. But you do a bad thing and you feel dissonance for doing that bad thing. That is normal. And it's how you negotiate with yourself what is normal and abnormal for our given perceptions and appraisals of ourselves. Maybe you disagree with your mother's appraisal of you being a good kid. Maybe you will not feel dissonance when you do something bad. That's normal too. You're still making normal what normal is for your own purposes. Here's a goofy example. DARE teachers, or DARE officers, the DARE program, if you're unfamiliar, it's don't do drugs, you'll die, kids. So they'll teach you that potheads are abnormal. They're ill-minded criminals. And you might believe that for a while, because of course you're normal, duh. Then, through life circumstances, let's say you become a pothead. Now you kind of have to justify your actions as being normal to not feel bad or the dissonance that comes from that. That way you don't value yourself as abnormal or an ill-minded criminal, as your DARE teacher once said.
Right. Things like, I'm not addicted. I can quit whenever I want. I don't have a problem. I need it because of things like that, right? Like justifications.
I don't think that's the point I was trying to make. So it's negotiating identity. DARE teachers say potheads are criminals. You believe that because that's what's perceived as normal at that time in your life. But then you become a pothead. And it's not all that bad. Maybe it is. I don't know your circumstances. We're assuming it's not that bad. You don't feel like a criminal. You maybe hold a job. You work your normal 40 hours. You contribute to society. You're a working member in your community. You're social. You're not, a criminal. Now you're feeling the dissonance of, well, I'm a good person, but I'm also an ill-minded criminal. So at some point you negotiate with yourself what that really is. That might be, okay, I guess my DARE teacher was wrong. I'm just a normal person living a normal life. Pot's okay. Or, insert any drug here. Although I suspect with most of the drugs you won't be thinking you're normal. Pot's just a good example because it's being legalized everywhere, because it turns out it's not as bad as it was perceived for a short period in our history. Not to make this episode about that, but that's just a prime example. I guess you could use religion as the example instead. It's normal to believe in God. It's normal to be a Christian. Let's say you do your research and you find out for yourself, oh, well, it's just not my thing. I'm not religious. I don't actually believe in God. Maybe you feel dissonance, cognitive dissonance throughout that process. Oh, I'm a bad boy. I'm naughty. I'm going to go to hell. I'm sinning. Until eventually you negotiate the identity that you're just a normal, healthy, well-functioning person with a set of beliefs. Let's go back to the example of the mother. That's a good role for yourself. But then your kids are grown and you're just like, well, I don't want to be a responsible mother. I've done my job. I'm done with that. Everyone else sees you as that. So you might feel a little bit of cognitive dissonance when you're like avoiding taking your grown kid a meal. Like, well, you're an adult now, you can do that. I'm a retired parent. That's my new title. That's my new identity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does, because now you're at this elevated role where it's like, I can just spoil my kids and then walk away, and now my kids have to deal with it. Like when you're like spoiling your grandkids, I should say. You buy them the favorite toy that they were begging mom and dad for, and then they go, see, grandma bought me this, which is why grandmas are awesome. Love you. How does that connect to like the call to the void?
How does that connect to the call to the void? Well, you might feel really bad for thinking, whoa, I'm having really dark thoughts. That's not who I want to be. That's not normal. Society will judge me harshly for that. Or maybe your whole upbringing was very wholesome, and there's just no reason in your mind that you should be having such dark or insidious thoughts.
And you're like, oh my God, why am I thinking that?
Yeah, why am I so bad? What's wrong with me? Why am I not normal? And cognitive dissonance comes with pretty much any change. We mentioned it in or we mentioned it very briefly in the episode about, I believe it was decentralization. Like in customer service, maybe the person you're dealing with is just so stressed out from having to spew the company's mythology or whatever, like
policy that you don't agree with.
Right. So you don't agree with it, and you're just thinking, oh, this is such bull crap. I feel like a piece of crap making these people give money for this package that's, not even a good package or whatever. And that's used as a tool to self-adjust. That's part of negotiating identity. You can ignore the cognitive dissonance, listen to quote unquote self-help that tells you need to get ahead, do what you can do in your career, don't worry about what other people think. But then you have this voice in your head saying, no, you're not like that. You have this identity you need to stick to. Calm down, bro. Let's think this out. Let's feel bad about that because that's not you.
As you were talking about cognitive dissonance, and when you realize, maybe you don't necessarily pinpoint it and go, yep, that's cognitive dissonance. But I think you realize that you're starting to disagree with yourself or what you've learned or what your upbringing is, and so you begin to experience cognitive dissonance, whether you know what that is or not, in that scenario, and that can produce anxiety.
Oh, of course, especially if the dissonance is overwhelming. Let's say you spent your whole life learning how to save people. Maybe you're a doctor. Maybe you took the Hippocratic Oath. But then you kill someone. So the level of cognitive dissonance that you're going to experience might result in acute anxiety.
Or even PTSD.
Perhaps.
Like if a patient dies on the table or something?
I guess that's probably a more realistic example. I meant like you kill someone, like murder them in cold blood, even though you've taken this Hippocratic Oath.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like that's a less extreme version. The one you mentioned, I definitely feel PTSD, like the dissonance you felt for that is so strong that like you can't go back to performing your job normally, perhaps. I think we've seen that portrayed in, a lot of television.
And it's a really real thing. Not that I've experienced it, but I mean, it strikes a chord with you, and there's a reason why it does. I think we see these TV characters who are going through those scenarios of those mistakes, and they're judging themselves so harshly. Whether that's because of cognitive dissonance, whether that's because they make a mistake, or they're judging their actions because they feel like they did something that's not normal or widely accepted. And I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here when I say this, but we really need to do a better job as people to not judge these internal thoughts. Especially ones that we don't think are, like, if we feel like they're not normal, like everything that we've talked about today, very normal thoughts, very, very common thoughts that I think all enter our brain at some point. And that's kind of part of life, right? Like there's going to be cognitive dissonance. So chances are you are thinking in a perfectly normal and explainable way. Obviously barring psychological or physiological issues that make one think abnormally. That's what we're going to talk about that next week. Things like mental ailments, psychological issues, things that would affect and be able to determine whether, it's normal or abnormal, right? Like that's what we're talking about next week.
Yes. Things that are truly abnormal to the normal you.
Right. And knowing this can not only help you have some thicker skin when people call you weird, or you're being harsh with yourself for supposedly not thinking normally, because chances are those people have those quote unquote weird thoughts too. Maybe not exactly the same, but definitely within the same realm. Chances are, given you have a relative outlook on normalcy, you yourself will know what is normal for you. You'll only care about limiting the dissonance you experience for thinking abnormal. Wes, elaborate on that a little bit. Like what does that mean when you only care about limiting the dissonance you experience for thinking abnormal?
So having a relativist outlook on normalcy is basically saying normal is subjective. We can look at all these factors that go into it and understand that in the grand scheme of things, this only affects me the way it affects me. And it's not completely abnormal to have these thoughts that are, from our perspective, abnormal to us. And by understanding that you are not like in this objective mold, like, oh, had bad thought, am abnormal, you can kind of stave off those encroaching thoughts of, why am I like this? I'm so weird. Oh my God. Barring if you have, or excluding those that have, anxiety that really makes you think, oh, I'm the worst. My family's disappointed in me. Just like having these really dark thoughts all the time about yourself. Barring those examples, understanding that normal is subjective will make you feel, can give you the ability to feel less harshly about your quote unquote abnormal thoughts.
If you think about it, abnormal thoughts are only classified as abnormal because we know that we wouldn't otherwise do them based on our circumstances and our upbringings and our environment. We perceive these things and we're not going to carry them out. Like the call to the void thing, like we're not going to actually do them. It's the only reason we think they're abnormal thoughts is because we wouldn't actually do them, right?
I think the thoughts are thought as abnormal though, because what purpose do they serve in our normal, quote unquote, normal everyday thinking? But also how society views it. I think if you told your friend, I thought about pulling out in front of a semi truck today, they might get concerned. So like within your community, those thoughts in your own personal bubble, your own mind, are probably abnormal to those around you because everyone has their own circumstances. I don't think the point you're making is like false or anything. I just think all of these topics are really, there's not enough like actual solid research on them to make conclusions like that. I'm sure it's not wrong, but also how many other examples are right, or how many other accounts of that situation are right.
Maybe one could just say that those are my thoughts and I perceive them to be normal. Dun dun dun. Oh man. Hey, before we start wrapping up here, Wes, I wanna talk a little bit about next week and how we're gonna classify abnormal thoughts and intrusive thoughts actually too. There's a piece of this that we're not going to have time for this week that we're going to lump in with the abnormal thoughts, and those are intrusive thoughts. Sometimes those are normal, but for a lot of times they're not, right? Which is why we're talking about them next week.
Right. I would say it is normal to have intrusive thoughts, but those individual intrusive thoughts are probably not normal, because I don't know anyone who hasn't had intrusive thoughts, but generally there's a reason behind them.
I mean, isn't a call to the void a technically intrusive thought?
If it gives you if there's some type of detriment to your well-being, you might consider it intrusive. If you have fun pondering those types of things, I don't think you would consider it intrusive.
I'm so excited to talk about this next week. We should just hit the fast forward button real quick, and I'm really looking forward to it. How about you?
Let's switch it up on them because we're so excited for the next episode. Let's label it as this one, but drop that one. Okay, cut that.
Hey, don't forget to reach out to us at our socials at the Life Midwest. Check out the website. Make sure you're telling people about us on your favorite podcasting platform. And actually, since last recording, we also have a visual podcast. That's right, folks. If you'd rather follow us and listen to, if you like to have your talking head videos of your favorite people and platforms that you're subscribed to on YouTube, you can do that with us as well now, because now we are on YouTube as well.
'Tis true.
'Tis very, very true. You got anything before we head out, buddy?
Yeah, let's play a quick game.
Okay.
Let's try to think of an abnormal thought. Don't go into the realm of, like psychological disorders. Like,
Okay.
obviously, schizophrenia isn't normal for most people.
So just think of an abnormal thought.
Something that, like, you could argue is actually abnormal. Like, if you were to play the devil's advocate and just argue to the death, what thought is so abnormal to you that you can come up with, like, some bullshit science explanation to it? This is abnormal because...
Okay. I think I've got it.
All right.
Now what?
You say it.
Okay. So my abnormal thought is to, in this 20-degree weather and blistering cold, in the clothes that I am currently wearing, jump out the window behind you and do a barrel roll down the roof and onto the ground and land it.
Did you really have that thought?
Yes.
Let me explain why that's a normal thought.
Okay.
Because we are recording a podcast talking about normal thoughts, and I asked you to think of something abnormal, and you thought of the most abstract bullshit you could think of.
Yeah.
Normal, right?
Because you asked me to think of it.
Yeah. I mean, sure, carrying that out your actions would be very abnormal. Like, the fuck is Kevin doing?
I've had enough. I don't want to edit this episode.
But that thought you had wasn't abnormal, was it? I mean, guess maybe if you had that in a vacuum. Like, if that thought came naturally to you,
No, you're
from
you're
others.
right. The thought isn't abnormal because I'm not actually thinking about doing it.
Right. That's more of a call to the void if it was a real thing, perhaps.
Which is an abnormal thought.
Is a call to the void an abnormal thought?
I don't know. I guess we'll have to talk about it next week.
Damn it, he got me with my own shtick.
Oh man. All right, folks. It's been a good one. It's been fun. It's been real. It's been real fun. Hit us up at the Life Midwest where you see us. Keep in touch over social media. Email us. Subscribe. Leave some reviews. We'll see you all next week.
Deuces.
Bye-bye.